r/AskReddit. Teachers, what's the darkest thing you've seen from a student? Our school had a selective mute kid that graduated last year. Kids were calling him Fish Boy. It turns out he was buying fish and killing them in various ways on Instagram based on people's requests in the comments. What the duck? He needs help. Kid seemed down and I asked him to please tell me what was wrong. Not today, but when you're ready. I was his last class of the day and he promised he would. End of the year comes and he told me his brother killed himself. He said he thought about the same many times but always remembered that he had made me a promise. I made him promise to call me if he ever thought he might again and he promised me again. He's doing amazingly well and is about to graduate from college. Girl was going through a lot. Unprompted told me that her older brother died in Iraq recently and that was why she was having such a rough time. I tell all her teachers so they know it's thing to be aware of. I'm super nice with her and supportive. Eventually I tell the counselor and he calls home to ask if the family needs anything. Turns out she has never had a brother. Edit for your information. She was 11 years old. There was kid in my wife's class that squeezed the classroom hamster to death. He just wanted to tend the rabbits. I had a third grader tell me in excruciating detail about every time that he's been removed from a home. Starting with how he was taken from his mother at 2 because they found drugs in his crib. Imagine the toughest, baddest little dude you can and multiply the attitude by 100. He wrote me a note at the end of the year saying that I was a great teacher because he knew I loved him even when he was bad. It has been and will always be the best note I ever get from a student. In that same class, I had a little boy try to cut his wrists with scissors saying that he didn't want to be here anymore. Cops came to interview him and said they were just kid scissors, so it wasn't a big deal. Thankfully, mom took it seriously and got him the help he needed. Those cops are dumb. The intent should be what matters, not the weapon. I taught welding and metal sculpture at the high school level for a year. One morning, one of my students, a quiet, awkward, but really nice young man, came into class and asked me for a band-aid. I asked him what for and he replied that it was for a burn. Class hadn't started yet for the day. He showed me and it was a fresh second-degree burn that was already blistering. It was in the shape of an A. Some kids, if I'm going to be honest, they were bottom performers and troublemakers, from a different class of mine had swiped a small metal letter A from one of my supply bins, heated it with a lighter, and then branded this kid on the morning school bus. He had let the kids do it because he really wanted to fit in. He didn't have many friends and these kids had seemed cool because they were always acting out. As a mandatory reporter, I reported it. The police got involved. Other than that I have no idea what else happened. Darkest thing. I was an intervention specialist. Had a student who was a mysterious pooper. For a while he would poop on the floor in the bathroom and no one knew who was doing it. Ah yes, the mad pooper, as we called our versions of him. Every school and generation has theirs. A timeless classic. My grandfather was a band director. I was taking a trumpet lesson with him after school when another teacher walked in and handed my grandfather a suicide note he found from a student I didn't really know. My grandfather left and I went home, and after talking to him later, he talked with the student and the counselor and eventually they got him the help he needed. I'm not a teacher but I did see this one kid sitting right at the front of the class beating his meat to the teacher while she was explaining something to us. She eventually saw it, screamed with shock and ran out of the class. I teach teens with emotional behavioral disorders as their primary disability and learning as a secondary. Anyways, seen lots of shit but I'll narrow down to these two. First one, student D was hard to connect with. He was so disconnected from his peers even. He was on the smaller side and lacked confidence. D was the head down disengaged type that usually took a little longer to build a trusting relationship with. I just assumed this was his coping mechanism at school. One day he was gone and another student announced that it was for molesting his little sisters. It turned out there was a big bust in our area within his trailer park where children were just being passed around between convicted sex offenders and used to create porn. The reason truth unfolded was because his little sister's teacher noticed that she had bled through her clothing in her first grade class. His little sister admitted that he had been abusing her for longer than she can remember. The most upsetting detail I remember is that his mother was allowing it to happen in exchange for childcare and money. He ended up in a juvenile detention center before his court date because he had an IEP. I was still responsible for providing instruction to him. What that meant was I would send a packet of math worksheets to his tutor at the center. Every couple weeks they would get sent back to me for grading. The first time I received his work there was doodles and symbols. The next time, he started to write phrases. By the end of the semester, he wrote me pleas to help him all over his pages. Later on I found out he was being victimized simultaneously by an older man he met on the bus. He is now married and has a child of his own. Second, I had a brother and sister, K+M, in class together who had a unique bond. They had not spent most of their years growing up together as they were in and out of foster cares or group homes. At this point in time, they were living with an aunt, but it mostly seemed like they were house hopping between family members. Their attendance was poor and it was hard to keep track of their current residence. It wasn't very unusual in this district because there's a lot of mobility, especially around this population. Halfway through the year we got a new female student, Jay. Her mother had gone to prison, so she moved to the area to live with family members. Jay made a positive first impression with peers despite being quiet and more reserved. She had anxiety and depression, so when she stopped attending after the first week no one seemed alarmed. It was such a big life change, so most teachers presumed she bailed on school. It was at this time K+M were thriving at school. They were seeming more positive and taking better care of themselves. Come to find out, they invited Jay over one weekend and decided to beat and drug her in an apartment where they had been staying unsupervised. They kept her high in a closet and prostituted her for income. That then explained why they were wearing new clothes and fresh haircuts. When we were 12, a classmate of mine was obsessed with another girl. He would brag about his plan to drag her into the boys' bathroom and rape her. As kids, we didn't know what that truly meant or what to do about it. I remember talking about it at recess. Teachers eventually got involved, and nothing ever happened. Thank God. When I was in 5th grade we had a kid in my class who tore the world map out of his assignment notebook, wrote sex map across it in big letters, and circled all of these locations around the map where he wanted to go and rape girls. This was at a private church-run school as well. He tried to get me and my friends along with a bunch of 4th graders to sign it, but we all declined. At lunch we told our teacher. She asks this kid where the map is. He pulls it out, and she practically drags him to the principal's office. Our school was pretty strict and old-fashioned, so our principal had a flat wooded paddle that he would use on the kids, so did something serious like purposefully hurt another kid. They called the kid's mom and she came by the school and said she wanted him paddled until she was satisfied. He got paddles 12 times. I remember when I was younger I saw the swastika for the first time and thought it looked cool. Started drawing it all over my desks when I was bored because I liked the shape. Got older and learned what the symbol meant. I can't imagine what all my teachers were thinking about that dumpy, unkempt, social awkward white guy in the back corner of the room. Saw a couple of kids walking down the hallway. One ends up behind another. For no reason at all punches him in the head as hard as he can. I immediately call him over and ask why the crap he did it. He immediately acts like he has no idea what I'm talking about. If I hadn't seen him do it I'd probably have believed it, he was so convincing. I remind him there are cameras and then he admits he did it just because he wanted to. No remorse. No reason. No regret. I had multiple other incidents like that with him through the year. I worked in a low-income high-needs school then and tried my best not to judge my students, but it was weird to honestly believe this 14-year-old was going to seriously injure or kill someone one day. I substituted at a school for kids with intellectual disabilities and emotional disorders for a while. Majority of the kids had autism to varying degrees. The darker stuff didn't come from the students so much as faculty gossiping about what the students' home lives were like, but from the kids themselves. In one class with more verbal and well-behaved students, occasionally one would, for instance, get frustrated with a problem, start yelling, "None of this shit matters," followed by what I would call quasi-suicidal existential ideation. It would kind of set off a chain reaction in the class where other students would sort of rally along in agreement. One time when I was teaching a US history class in prison, Some students were asking how abortions were done before it was legal, so I mentioned a few methods and finished with, then there's the age-old method of accidentally falling down the stairs. A student at the back piped up, as serious as could be. That one still works. It saves 5 grand but costs 12 years. Not a teacher, but in my 5th grade class, this autistic kid that had a crush on this girl decided to make his move. They sat on the same table in English. So the autistic kid stands up on top of the table and takes his pants down and shakes his ass for not only the girl, but for everyone in the whole classroom to see. The kid got suspended and surprisingly the girl didn't leave the school, but she was crying of embarrassment. High school teacher. Our first writing assignment of the year for seniors is a college admissions essay, where they have to write about an obstacle they overcame to make it to where they are now. One of my senior girls turned in an essay about being drugged and gang raped at a party the previous summer. Said essay also included how therapy was helping her and how the boys who raped her were being prosecuted. But that was rough to deal with. Parents were super nice and supportive but suggested she find something a little less intense to write her admissions essays about. My wife said the darkest she's seen so far is a kindergarten kid telling his mom he was going to kill her, his mom, and the mom shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal whatsoever. At first I thought the behavior I observed was normal, but I was concerned with the frequency. I'm a para, and I often take my kiddos to inclusion, specials, class within a class, ACT. I would often have to redirect distract a reg-ed kindergartner from masturbating in class. I reported this problem to her classroom teacher, who said a report has been made to CPS because that teacher, other staff and even classroom parents have witnessed the same thing on many occasions. A few weeks the teacher updates me. My concerns were valid. Her behavior was a result of sexual abuse. The mom was TMI with our school's principal, nurse, and the classroom teacher, making sure everyone knew the perpetrator was from the child's paternal side. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.